Welcome to Unit 3. In Unit 3 we're going to explore the how to target your market, and we're going to talk a little bit about strategic planning. Okay? Well, before we do that, let's go ahead and go back and look at Unit 2 and what we covered. Okay? As a quick review, remember the first thing we did was we talked about research and the two different kinds of research, primary and secondary. Primary being where you go collect the data. Okay, you go to wherever the raw data is and get that. Secondary research is where someone has already studied the idea or the topic or whatever it is and has collected information on it, and now you're relying on what they have done. And we have two kinds of information. We have the numbers, which is again data driven, and then we have what is more qualitative, which is people's attitudes and feelings, and how, in other words, a soft answer rather than a hard number answer. So we looked at that, and because it's important if you're going to be doing research for whatever company you're going to set up, how you're going to go about doing that. So, and then we looked at what are the kinds of things that we really want to know. Well, we need to know a little bit about the industry, whatever that is, whatever industry you're going to specialize in, and you want to know something about the type of customers that you think you're going to be serving. Are they out there? Where do you find them? You need to know something about your competitors. Who's beating on the door and got the business already, and who are you going to have to deal with? In other words, compete with. And then the other thing is you want to know if there are any other companies that you can partner with, that you can have some synergistic relationship with that can boost your business at the same time it's boosting theirs. We looked at why we even create a business plan. The most important thing is obviously giving you a set of ideas, a very firm approach, if you will, to the steps that you're going to need to go through to accomplish whatever the business objective is that you have. It can also help you with investors. Investors want to know some details about the business, and they want to know the likelihood of its success before they're willing to put money into it. So that's an important part. And on the flip side of that, you may also use your business plan when you're trying to attract key employees. Now remember, there is a difference between key employees and regular employees. Okay, the key employees are the very most important people. They're going to be with you. They're going to be helping you make decisions. Okay, where other employees will be just basically punching a time clock and doing what they're told to do. Okay. And then we figured out, well, how do we go through this process? And obviously you have some idea of what your business is going to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this class. So we need to understand that marketplace. We have to know who are our likely customers, and we'll talk more about that later. And then we need to know something about the industry. And you might remember the example of the good Mr. Hootman and his buggy whip, which is a really, really great idea for the horse and buggy era, except that he was doing this almost 10 years, well, not quite 10, 4 to 7 years after the automobile started to take off, started to really become popular. And so we talk about producing something in a declining market. Okay? And then what are you going to do in your business idea that's going to make your business different than your competitors? Okay? Now, we did talk a little bit about non-disclosure agreements. Matter of fact, I'd ask everybody in the Unit 2 discussion to digitally sign a non-disclosure agreement because of the level of information that we exchange here in this course about our individual business ideas. But as I said last week, it is not a catch-all. It's not a panacea because oftentimes, especially investors, professional investors that deal with small companies all the time, they're not going to waste their time signing such an agreement. Okay, so just be aware of that. Okay, moving on a little further. We did talk about PowerPoint slides and how to create really good ones, even though you don't actually have to create any PowerPoint slides until you get to Unit 10. But I wanted to bring out those ideas mainly because they were discussed in this chapter in your book. So in your reading for this particular week, or week 2, it was discussed there, so I did want to cover it at that point. So continuing on, we also, in your discussion thread, you should have been presenting your elevator pitch. And again, the idea of an elevator pitch is that really quick getting to the essence of your business idea, and in such an informative and exciting way that your listener, the first thing they're going to say is, tell me more, give me more information. I want to know more about your business idea. So especially if you're dealing with an investor, and that's what the idea was of that particular part of the assignment, you'll get to do more with this in your Unit 10 PowerPoint. So just keep that in mind, that you need to have a way to present your business idea very succinctly, but with a grab that gets whoever you're talking to excited about your business idea. You don't want to give them all the details. You just want to get them hooked so that they will ask for more information. And then I did allude a little bit to the fact that your sales pitch is similar in some respects, but much more a much quicker hook, if you will. And you're dealing with a different group of people, especially if you're in a retail situation like the picture indicates here. That means somebody's gone to the trouble of walking into your establishment. So obviously they have some kind of an interest. Okay. Now, if you're in an environment where you're trying to solicit business from people who have no idea who you are or what you're doing, then that's a different situation. But you still have an extremely brief period of time, if anyone will let you speak to them, where you get that chance to just drop that kernel of information that will ask them or get them to ask you for more information about your cure to their pain, okay, or their want, your solution to their want, or your solution to their need. Okay, if you do have any questions, make sure you let me know. And what we'll do tonight is we're going to continue the discussion, and we're going to move forward a little bit. By this point, you've probably heard about the 3 commandments of business, but I'll go ahead and go through them for you. They're not the 10 commandments, there's only 3, but they're an important 3, because the first commandment is to know thy customer. Okay? It's really important to know who that customer is and what they want. Now, your second law or commandment of business is know thy customer, because that customer is extremely important. And I'm sure you can guess what the third one is. Know thy customer. It doesn't matter how long you've been in business. It doesn't matter how great your business idea is. You must know your customer, who you think your customer is and who will really be your customer. So we know that there's, what, 7 billion people on the planet right now. How many of that 7 billion are going to be your customers? Okay? Well, obviously not all of them, unless you have something really special. Okay? So what we're looking for is that group inside that giant population, whether it's the 300 million people in the United States, or whether it's however many million or thousand or 100,000 are in your local community. Okay? But there is some segment of that population that your product and your service will fit perfectly. That's who you want to find. Okay? The people that are going to be most likely to need and want your service or product. Okay? So we're going to target that market. So how do we find them? Well, we talked a little bit about research last week. So some of the research you want to do is some demographics. You want to know a little bit about the population so that you can determine who in that population are your most likely customers. So to see a few things here on this slide, the table 2 breaks out the population in a variety of things. We have, how is the family composed? What kind of income do they have? What education? Are they married? How many are married and single or whatever? By gender, by age, all those are extremely important. And sometimes you'll be dealing with just numbers. We have some other information up in the upper right-hand corner. Here we've broken out the population demographics by race, if you will, for different age brackets, for the under 30 and the over 30 and over. Okay, and then you have another age distribution pie chart down in the lower right. I only show those as examples of different ways you can get information about the population that you're dealing with. Then you can come back. So if you're selling Medicare supplemental insurance door to door, you probably are only interested in those people who are 65 or older. Okay. It'd be nice if you also knew what portion of that 65 and older had a certain income. Okay. And so, because obviously they have to have enough money to afford your product. So, all this information comes together as you're doing your research. Here's another interesting way of displaying information. This is for the state of Iowa. And what's happened is they took all the counties in Iowa and they broke them out by different categories. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner, the green one is agriculture and something, okay? And the next one to the right, the gray, is dealing with how much manufacturing. And if the color is very light, there's very little manufacturing there. If the color is very dark, the gray color is very dark, there's a lot of manufacturing there. So you see how they're breaking this out. And for each one of those things, they took each county and determined how much that was an important item. And you'll notice if you look down across the bottom that the one in the middle, the orange one, says who's evangelical, and to the far right who's Catholic. So here we've even gone into religious preference. So this information has been gathered somewhere. Now you have the opportunity to use that information as you're going through your analysis. Okay? And there might be something similar for your country, for your community. Now, here we're looking at something a little different. Again, a pie chart that looks very similar, but this pie chart's breaking out by educational level. Okay? The box in the lower left, now we're talking about what percent of what age bracket is going to have a presence in social networking, either Facebook or whatever, Twitter, what have you. And so that's an interesting idea. Notice the people 65 or over, okay? The seniors, very few in that group, right? So obviously if you were trying to sell Medicare supplemental insurance to people 65 or older, you're probably not going to rely very much on social networking. That's not going to be of much help to you. Okay. The bar chart across the bottom is breaking out by income, okay, and number of households in that income bracket. So again, some very important information is available to you because organizations like the Bureau of Economic Analysis maintain statistics like this. Okay, now something that you may be interested in, and I'll mention it, and if you've checked the announcements, you'll probably, I may not have posted it yet, but I normally in this unit I post an announcement telling you about this psychographic analysis. Okay, and what it does is it takes a questionnaire, uses a questionnaire, and my post to you will ask you to go to that questionnaire and do it for yourself so that you can see how you stack up. Okay, but then it takes and it looks at what your primary motivation would be, or what a person's primary motivation would be, and who's into using high resources and highly innovative as opposed to using very low resources and have very low innovation. So this is something that's really interesting. And the next slide, of course, you see the link over here. It's Strategic Business Insights. And again, I just found it online and I thought it was particularly interesting for you. So I give you the link, and in the announcement, I think I put the link in there also, both to their survey and to the the company's main homepage. So here's an example, and you may have to read this in the slides that I put in doc sharing. It may be a little hard to read on your screen, but it takes the total population and then it breaks out what the median age is and what percentage is married and what have you, and then it identifies which group they would fall in this particular spread. So you have the innovators, the people who make decisions and really are the forward thinkers, the ones that will go out and buy something new. If you've ever heard of Google Glass, okay, there's some beta testers who were buying Google Glass when it was $1,500 a pop. Okay, well, those are the innovators, the early adopters, if you will. And then as you go through, you find the different group, the thinkers, the believers, the achievers, the strivers, the experiences, the makers, and then the survivors. Okay, so it's interesting to have some handle for how your population might be in the area that you're targeting would spread around here. Which ones of those would you be most interested in marketing to? Which ones do you think would be the most interested in your product or service? Okay. This is another interesting way of displaying information. Some of you might be familiar with, in the hard sciences, in chemistry, the periodic table of elements. This follows that kind of a format where it gives a bit of information in each block. Okay, and again, I give you the website to go to for that. It's Mindset Media. You can just Google them and go there, and they have the definitions for each of these and what the spread of the population would be for where they've done the study. I only show these to give you an idea of how in-depth some analysis of the population can be. Whether or not it is worth it to you to spend the money to get these things is going to depend on what the profit potential is for your business idea and what kind of investment you have available. But these numbers and this kind of an analysis is something that is very sophisticated. You may not need anything that sophisticated, but at least be aware it's there. Okay. This one again is an interesting little bar chart. What's happened is the numbers across the bottom represent the options that you see in the yellow block up above. So if you look at number 1, those 5 colored bars over number 1 at the bottom represents who clicked on an ad, and the colored bars represent the different age brackets. Okay. And so you can see for this, and we don't know what the ad was, but basically it's get this information. So now you can follow it through and see which age brackets are the most important for each of these particular things. And again, it's one way that a particular study was created. Okay. Now, we probably know, and I'm sure you could decide for yourself, where you would fit on a continuum. In other words, a straight line between being very emotional in how you buy things and being very logical. The emotional person, you see the kind of characteristics on the left that they're going to be concerned with. So it's kind of like when I had the chance to see the airplane. I didn't have to do a really in-depth analysis of whether it was going to be economically feasible for us to buy an airplane, whether it was going to cost us more in the long run or not. I didn't go through any of that. I just knew I wanted that. It's sexy, and I want to fly, and I want that kind of airplane. Okay, and I had the money to do it. Okay? That's a little different than the person who sits there and says, okay, it's going to cost us this much for insurance, this much for upkeep, this much. We're only going to use it 3 times in a month, maybe. It would be easier just to go get on a commercial airplane and go where we want to go. Okay, that's more a logical approach. Okay, and so you're going to have customers who fall somewhere between those two extremes depending on the product and the service that you're offering. Okay? So you need to know how to appeal for the ones who are more emotional and how to appeal to the ones who are more logical, because you'll have both and you'll have everything in between. So you have to have a way to structure your marketing and your approach to those different sensitivities in how people buy. Okay? Now, one thing we were talking about as you do your analysis of that marketplace, the question becomes, is that market, how big is it? Is it an extremely large market where there are thousands upon thousands of people just out there very eligible to buy your product, or is it a little smaller, or is it extremely small? Okay? If it's extremely small, you're going to have a hard time going in there and dragging your piece of that pie out, okay? Because there's already competitors in there handling that market, okay? So if they are, how are you going to, how hard are you going to have to work to get a piece of that very small market? Okay? Where if it's an extremely big market, maybe you don't have to work quite as hard to get a piece of the big market that you can survive on. And that's the key. You can not only to make your business survive, but also to make it grow to the point that it has the kind of income that you're really looking for. After all, isn't that the reason we go into business? To make money? Okay. Okay, now, in addition to knowing the current size of your marketplace, you want to know what's happening to that marketplace. Is it getting bigger or is it getting smaller? Just like Mr. Hootman and his buggy whip, here he is coming up with a product for a marketplace that is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That's why you don't know who Mr. Hootman is, but you do know who Henry Ford is. Okay? So you need to understand directly whether your marketplace is growing or shrinking. Okay. Now, once you have the overall marketplace identified, then the next question is, can you narrow down that market group to a smaller segment that is more ideally suited to your particular product or service? Okay? So again, you could be marketing to senior citizens, okay, to whatever the product is, but if you can target the group that is well enough off financially to be able to afford a big fancy boat like the picture in the upper left hand corner, and you have something that will appeal to them, then you have narrowed that market down so that you're not wasting your advertising and marketing dollars and your effort on a group that is not as fruitful for you as that very narrow niche market would be. Okay? So again, all these pictures do is display different niche markets that might be appropriate given a particular business scenario. In other words, a business opportunity. Okay, so with that said, we're going to move into a slightly different idea. Okay, and that is, what makes your business so special? Okay? If it isn't special, you wouldn't be taking this class, right? If you didn't think it was special. And I'm sure that everyone that has a particular business idea already knows who the competitors are, who's already selling that product or service. Okay? And if so, what's going to make you different from those competitors? Okay? And there's basically 4 things that you can compete on. You can compete on a better product. You can compete on a better price. You could compete on better service, and you can compete on being more convenient. Okay? So you want to know how your marketing idea will fit into that situation. Okay? So that you can identify what makes you special. Because if you're not special to your customers, they're not going to come. Now, it may be something as simple as the little, bakery down the street, and what makes that bakery special is the fact it's close by, and they have good food, and it's not too expensive. Okay, it may be, in the case of the picture in the center top, it may be a technological item like those solar panels. Okay? And it may be the only provider around that installs solar panels. Well, that makes you unique if you're that sole provider of that service and product. Okay? So therefore, there's going to be a group of potential customers who are interested enough and be willing to pay for it. Okay? And the same thing's true for each of the other pictures. Each one has something special about their particular business. Okay? Now, in the old days, it was enough to, I can remember hearing this, that they said if you would build a better mousetrap, people would beat a path to your door. In other words, all you had to do was have the best product, whatever it was. Didn't matter what it was. As long as you had the very best product, people would beat a path to your door. Well, that doesn't exactly work. Okay? You have to have more than just the best product. You have to be able to educate the buyer so that they know it's the best product at a competitive price and that it solves their wants. Notice I didn't say their needs. It solves their wants. Because people only buy what they want. They don't buy what they need. They buy what they want. Okay? So be aware of that. It's just like, people, in our case, when we were going to buy my Miata, we needed a car. Okay? A basic car would have worked really, really great. Matter of fact, I had a Saturn that we were getting rid of. Okay? So another car equivalent to that Saturn coupe, or four-door, would have been just fine. But the idea of a sports car, that's special. Okay? So that's way beyond what I needed. I got what I wanted. Difference. And I really should clarify that a little bit. Let's rephrase the wording on that. My wife permitted me to get what I wanted. Okay? There's no such thing as me just going out and buying something I want. If she doesn't agree with it, it doesn't happen. I don't know about your home, but it don't happen if she don't agree. So, okay, moving forward. What would happen if you were to do your analysis and you decide that, there are no competitors for your particular business idea? What does that tell you? Well, it tells you a couple things. One, if there are no competitors, maybe you're not looking in the right place. Maybe you're fooling yourself into thinking that there are no competitors. Or more importantly, if there really are no competitors, there's probably no market. There's nobody out there who wants to buy that product. Okay? So unless you have come up with the most whiz-bang thing that had never been invented before and it's not similar to anything else, and most of us aren't in that position, okay? If there's no competitors there, there's probably nobody who wants to buy it. Either that or you're kidding yourself, you're deluding yourself by not looking in the right place to find the competitors. Okay, so who are the competitors? Well, they're going to break down, again, depending on your particular business idea, into a couple of things. Could be someone that sells exactly to your marketplace right there. Okay? It could be the big box stores that are selling a product very similar to yours. Okay? And of course, they have the advantage they're selling so many things that a lot of customers come to them for something else and they'll see that other thing and buy it from them. Online. We all know what the online environment is. And if your product is able to be sold online, it probably is already. Okay? So that's serious competition unless you're able to compete in that environment. Okay? Indirect competition is something a little different. That's where people aren't exactly selling your product, but they sell something that fits in the, should I say, the solution area of what your problem would solve. So if your product would solve a particular want for people, there may be some other product that will solve that same want. Okay? Let's use an example of a restaurant. Okay? You may have a restaurant that has really good general food. Okay? Just run-of-the-mill restaurant. You know, you can get your meat and your potatoes and what have you. There are going to be some other restaurants that sell that same kind of food, but there's going to be some restaurants that sell maybe specialty food, like Chinese food or Mexican food or something that's very unique. Okay, and even though they're not directly selling the exact same thing that you're selling, they're selling something so similar that they still compete with you. Okay, because your customers could go there or come to you. And then it's not just enough to know what's going on with the existing competitors, but if the marketplace is that lucrative and you're deciding to go into business in that marketplace, other people may be deciding to do the same thing. And that's going to increase the amount of competition that is available. Okay? So you also have to consider what's going to happen in the future. Okay? Okay. Now, one of the things that we talk about is how the market gets spread out. Now, some of you may have had me for the microeconomics course or where we talk about market share and oligopolies. That's where this slide comes from, if you recognize it. And if not, if you end up taking that course later, you may see that slide again. But all it's doing is spreading out how much of the marketplace, in this case it's for light beers, each brewery or each brand of beer has. So each one sells so much of the marketplace. And if you look at Bud Light at the top, it's got the lion's share. It's got over 36%, almost 37% of the marketplace, compared to Miller Genuine Draft Light, which only has less than 1% of the marketplace. Okay? So it lets you know how competitors stack up in that array of that particular product. So the same thing can be found out for almost any industry. Now, one of the things that affects how much competition there is how easy or how difficult it is to get into the industry. We call that barriers to entry. Now, obviously, it's not barriers like I have portrayed here, where someone's put up a bunch of debris across the street to block entrance. But it can be, how big is the investment to get into the business? If it's a very big investment is required, it's going to be hard for someone to start in that business. If it's a relatively small investment, then it's very easy for competitors to get in. What about government regulation? Okay, let me see if the next slide deals with that. Yeah, here we go. So, how much does it cost you to get set up in the business? And what is the initial investment? What about government regulations? Okay, is this an area where you have a lot of very particular rules and regulations that have to be followed? Okay, how is pricing in that industry? Okay. Intellectual property, what is that? Well, if you have created something, let's say software, you create software and you have that copyrighted. Now, you own that product, okay? And so if the underpinning of that particular industry is that product that someone has copyright protection on, then it's going to be hard for you to compete with them unless you come up with something that's totally different. But does the same thing. So you may have that problem to deal with, or competitors may. So you may be the lucky one who comes up with a really new, innovative idea and gets it copyrighted or trademarked or patented. And then if anyone wants to use that idea, they've got to come to you and pay you a royalty. Okay? Economy of scale, what that refers to is it takes a certain amount of effort to produce something, to manufacture something. And if you're only manufacturing a few of them, okay, then the individual cost of making each one could be very high. Okay, let's say that you invested in a building, you're paying $1,000 a month rent on a building, and you're making pies. You have a bakery, you're gonna sell pies. Okay, and you have one oven and you have one freezer in the back and one refrigerator. You can make a certain number of pies with that equipment. Okay, now your cost per pie is going to be a certain amount. Okay, now if you can increase the number of pies you can make with that same equipment, let's say instead of just working your baker for 4 hours a day, let's say that you're going to have different bakers and you're going to work 24 hours a day. Okay, so now the additional cost of labor is the only thing you have, but you're spreading the cost of the building, the $1,000 a month, the cost of the oven, the cost of the refrigerator and freezer and all that stuff. You're spreading it over more and more pies. Okay, so that your cost per individual pie for these other things that you're spreading the cost on goes down. Okay, so the bigger and bigger you get, you can actually produce at a smaller cost, okay, depending on how the cost structure is for your particular product. That's what economy of scale is. If you can get bigger and bigger and bigger, then you can reduce your cost of production to a certain extent. Now, if we go one more step, if you have a group of companies that are competing, that are in that marketplace, and they are the big companies, like let's go to cars for a minute. We've got General Motors, we've got Chrysler, we've got Toyota, we've got Mazda, whatever. And now you invent a new car and you want to sell your car. Well, these big companies have the economies of scale so much that they have reduced their manufacturing cost for these products. So now you go to make a car and you have to meet all the safety requirements they have to meet, government regulations, but you have to practically hand make the car because you don't have the ability to set up the big mass production assembly lines to make the cars. Okay? So your car is going to be very expensive. That's one of the problems that Tesla has. Okay? Tesla has a wonderful car idea, but right now their sedan averages slightly over $100,000. So who are going to be the buyers of that sedan? It's not going to be the average person who goes out and buy their choice is buy a Toyota, Celica or whatever the basic Toyota, the Toyota Prius, or go buy a Tesla. Well, difference between $20,000 and $120,000 is going to limit that marketplace. Well, if Tesla could make their cars in the tens of thousands, like Toyota does, then they could bring the cost of that car down to where it was more competitive with a Toyota. Okay? But they don't have the economy of scale because they're just too small. Okay? What is the customer loyalty? If the customers are so happy with their existing providers of their service or product that they will not leave them, they're really loyal to them, then what are they going to do? They're not going to leave them to come to you or to come to a new competitor. So all these things are barriers to entry. Okay? The market saturation, what that means is that all the customers that want to buy the product are buying it. In other words, it normally refers to a market that is shrinking where there's fewer and fewer people that want to buy that particular product, and there's enough competitors there already that the price has been driven down and that the customers are quite happy. And you can't come in and compete with a low enough price to steal enough customers away to survive. So all those things are barriers to entry, initially barriers to you entering the business, but also barriers once you're in the business and established and you can make it over those hurdles, it's barriers to anyone else coming into the industry. So, continue on. In addition to barriers of entry, you need to know what your strategic position is. Now, what are we talking about strategic position? Okay. Well, basically what it is that SWOT analysis you may have heard if you've already had a management course. Okay. And basically what you do is you're looking for what are your strong suit? What is the strengths that you bring to this industry or this marketplace? What's going to be the best part that you can do? And at the same time, what are you weak in? What is the area that's going to hurt you the most? Okay? And then you go down because you're not strong in that area. And then you look at what is the opportunity. Okay? So how much potential business is there out there? And what are the threats to you? And you can use this SWOT analysis for any decision that you go to make. Because invariably, for any decision, whether it's in business or in life, there's going to be some strength and some opportunity. There's going to be some weakness you have to deal with and some threat. Okay? So those are the kinds of things that you want to do. But that SWOT analysis can be an extremely important tool for you to organize your thinking about what it takes to accomplish your objective. So as you're doing your business plan, a major part of that is figure out where you're strong at. Figure out where you're weak at. An example, your strong suit may be in being able to sell your product. Maybe you were in the selling area before for some other business and you know you can sell. Okay, that's your strong suit. But accounting is atrocious. You hate accounting. You just struggle with accounting. So you don't want to deal with that. Okay? What is the opportunity? Well, that's going to depend on the business. Okay? And the threat. Who are the competitors out there? So you can really work out that system for defining all the pieces of the pie, if you will. Your business has no weakness. That's my idea. Let's move ahead. And so what's really, really important is what do your customers think of you? What do they think of your product? What do they think of your price? What do they think of, is your quality of your product or service high enough that they're going to be pleased with it? Again, I'm not into reading these slides. This information comes right out of your textbook, but I do try to highlight a little bit of it because it's not what you think of your product or your service. It's what your customers think. Okay? So don't delude yourself into thinking because you know your product really, really well that your customers, are going to have that same level of knowledge. They're not. So you have to get into the mind of your customers. Okay? Now, at the same time, when you're doing that SWOT analysis, you have to go back in and look at what are your advantages. How do you operate? How are you organized? You'll notice some very similar things. I have economies of scale in there again, too. I shouldn't say I do because this comes right out of your book. Okay? But each one of these things you can have an advantage in, perhaps. So you need to define the areas of your business where you have an advantage, especially over your competitors. Okay? And the idea of a proprietary product. If you have invented some new technology, some new product, that's just the greatest thing in the world, okay, then that may be the best mousetrap, and that's what this particular slide is alluding to, a very high-tech mousetrap, okay, that just does everything that you could possibly want a mousetrap to do other than empty itself. And So that may give you a leg up. Okay. Now, I would like to spend a little time talking about something else. I'm sure that most of you would recognize many of these logos. Okay. All we did was just put up a bunch of logos. Okay. But each one of those logos that you see will immediately elicit a special feeling inside you. Something special that you respond to. Okay? What's it telling you? Okay? That logo is bringing out some concept of understanding. So most people, when they see the golden arches of McDonald's, they immediately can really recognize everything that McDonald's stands for. You know, the Happy Meals when they're taking their kids, you name it, and they know about it. Okay, but by the same token, if they look at GE, the GE emblem, that's a well-known emblem. Okay, that elicits a totally different picture. Or the eBay, that elicits a totally different picture, but you know exactly what it is. Okay, so it's what you're looking for in a logo is for someone to understand completely about the particular business that that logo represents. But the logo is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay? It's how you brand the whole thing, that the whole concept that is what lies under the surface, if you will, that supports that logo. Your author does a really good explanation or discussion about that. She describes driving across a bridge, I think, and seeing a billboard with a logo on. And she immediately knew everything there was to know about that company. Okay? She just had it implanted in her through all the times that she's heard about that company. Okay? Just like you would about any of the logos we just saw. Okay? So, you want to create that brand for you and your product and service. So you want to brand it, okay? And knowing that it's everything related to the brand, and we'll probably spend more time talking about that. But I thought this was particularly an interesting way of doing it, of describing what's involved with a brand. And again, you start off with the strategy, okay, that your brand immediately elicits how you market your product, how you get it out there. What are the values that your company professes, okay, and hopefully adheres to? What are the relationships that you have, either with other companies or with your customers? What is the content of your product or service? How do you identify it with its packaging? Okay, and then what tactics do you use to market that product? All that is part of your brand that is expressed in your logo, that people immediately recognize when they see your logo. So that's what branding is part about. So in addition to all those things, when we're talking about a business, we have to contend ourselves with how are we going to manage the risk. We talked about the possibility of failure earlier, but there's more than just the risk of failing. There's risks along the way. Okay? And so every day we know things are changing. So what you need to do is be aware, if you will, that you need to manage those risks. So what do you have to do? If you follow this circle, and you see it's a never-ending circle, because you identify and determine what risk are you possibly going to encounter. Okay? How can you minimize the impact of that risk? Okay? How can you manage it, basically? Once you've determined what the techniques are that you can use to control that risk, then how do you implement those techniques? And then how do you measure the results? And based on the results, look at the upcoming risk or modify future risks. Okay? Because there's always going to be more risk. So it's a never-ending cycle. And you as the owner of the business are the ones who are going to be most involved with that. So, some of these ideas we're going to explore a little bit later in the course in a little bit more depth. But obviously, as time goes on, if you have any questions, make sure you get a hold of me. Now, okay, so we know what we've got to do this week. Remember that each week there is a little bit of work toward your final project, even though you are not turning it in. Okay? So, you've got some reading to do. Make sure you read my announcements, even if they're boring. Read them anyhow. I might just say something important in them. Okay? Your discussion thread question this week is going to look at Google and some of the business ideas that they have, and you're going to do a little bit of a SWOT analysis on that. Okay? Just a little bit of an analysis, research on it, that will help you kind of define how you would do research for your own business. Okay, so it'll get you ahead and get you thinking about that. Okay, that's why I mentioned the SWOT analysis, because you're going to do basically a SWOT analysis. Okay, that's for the discussion thread. For your assignment, we're going to be talking about a chain of grocery stores called Trader Joe's. You get to do a little bit of research on them. What makes them so special? How did they get started? Okay. Okay, so the assignment should be pretty good. It should be very interesting. It lets you see how Trader Joe's got started and what makes them special. And are they special? And so you have some interesting stuff with that. By the way, yeah, okay. So don't forget your final project. Need to work on that. And you know how to contact me. None of that's changed, so I'm still at the same place and same time and same station. And with that, I thank you all very much for attending. I should see you in the discussion threads this week and in next week's seminar. So if you have any questions, please be sure to get a hold of me.